Hi, I'm Dr. Adam Irwin. I'm the adult Sunday school teacher at Faith Assembly of God in Toccoa, Georgia. And today we're going to go over lesson 3 of our unit. We've been going over the end times, looking at Daniel, Revelation, the Ante-Nicene Church Fathers, Dead Sea Scrolls, and so forth. So today we're going to go very briefly over our lesson from Daniel. As you can see here, we have last time we dreamed of last time we learned about Noah's dream of metals. It's mentioned in several places, as you can see there. Basically, Noah had a dream of several kingdoms that would rule over Israel, rule over God's people as he knew it. As he knew it. And so when Nebuchadnezzar is giving Daniel his dream of the statue, Daniel is shocked that 4 of these metals, these elements, aligned with Noah's metal dream, being gold, silver, bronze, iron, and an iron and clay mixture. Last time we also looked at Daniel 7. We looked at how Nebuchadnezzar's statue aligns with the 4 beasts in Daniel's dream, Daniel's vision, found in Daniel 7, how those align to Babylon, the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, and Rome, which includes the Rome to come, and it's the Antichrist. We also looked at Daniel 8, looking at Persia versus Greece, and how Persia is represented by the ram with 2 horns, and Greece, a goat with a big horn. So this time we're going to look at Daniel 9, and the 70 weeks. I'm not going to read over it this time, but if you would, you could pause the video and take a read so you have some background as to what we're doing. But this is the 70 weeks prophecy found in Daniel 9. Now, Gabriel arrives to give Daniel a vision because Daniel realizes that the 70 years of Babylonian captivity are almost up. So he fasts and prays to remind God, hey, those 70 years that you prophesied about, that you told us about in Jeremiah, those are up pretty soon. So Gabriel comes and gives Daniel a vision. As you see in verse 24, Gabriel tells Daniel that there will be 70 weeks to fulfill all prophecy. Now note here, recall when we talked about our units of time, that a Shemitah is a week of years, because a Shemitah is 7 years. So a week here is a Shemitah, or a week of years, 7 years. Now remember also, the Hebrew year is only 360 days long. Verse 25, know therefore and discern that 7 weeks of years will elapse between the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed prince, or the Messiah, comes. It will remain built for 62 weeks of years with open spaces and moats, but these will be troubled times. So, we have the first measurement is from the issuing of the decree to return and rebuild until Jerusalem is rebuilt. So 7 weeks times 7 years, that's 49 years between the time, the first measurement there. And then there will be troubles in building Jerusalem as well. Now Nehemiah and Ezra tell us that there were, in fact, quite a bit of troubles. Just read their books for more information. Nehemiah 2:1 says the decree to rebuild Jerusalem was issued in the month of Nisan in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. That comes out to March 14th, 444 BC, when the decree was issued. Ezra 6:16-18 tells us when the temple was rebuilt, and that would be Adar III of the 6th year of Darius I. That's how we know. So from March 444 BC until Jerusalem was rebuilt was, in fact, 49 years. The next Messiah, we know for some going, wait a second, how do we have the Jewish years, 360 days? Julius Africanus tells us how to calculate from Jewish years to Roman years, and that the Jewish calendar has 360 days in a year. So keep that in mind when we're doing these calculations, that the Jewish year does not line up with the Gregorian year. Then it says in verse 25, then after the 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, but not for himself. So, for 434 years, or 62 weeks, 62 Shemitas, after the wall is rebuilt, then the Messiah will be cut off. And that there will be 69 Shemitas, or 483 years, from the command to rebuild the walls. So, from March 14th, 444 BC, when the command to rebuild Jerusalem was issued, until Jesus came and died on the cross, April 6, 32 AD, was exactly 483 Hebrew years. So there was 434 years between Jerusalem being rebuilt and Jesus' death. Note that the command to rebuild Jerusalem doesn't align with when Jerusalem was actually rebuilt. There was a space and time there. Now, for the last Shemitah, verse 26-27, the people of a prince yet to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, but his end will come with the flood, and his desolations are decreed until the war is over. He will make a strong covenant with leaders for 1 week. For half of the week he will put a stop to the sacrifice and the grain offering. On the wings of detestable things the desolator will come and continue until the already decreed desolation is poured out on the desolator. So the 70th week is in the tribulation. It is the tribulation, the 70th week. The tribulation lasts 7 years. The Antichrist will destroy Jerusalem and the temple, and for the last 3.5 years of the tribulation he will put a stop to sacrifices and offerings. He will be ended at the end of the 7th year. Now here's another freebie. God used Nebuchadnezzar and Cyrus to prophesy when Israel would return in 1948. Nebuchadnezzar, who was insane, had his authority and his kingdom taken away for 7 years. Well, remember, 7 years of 360 days, because one Jewish year is 360 days. So 7 years of 360 days, that's 2,520 days. That's how long Nebuchadnezzar was insane. Now, August the 3rd, 537 BC, was the day that Cyrus rebirthed Israel from captivity. Israel was reborn from among the nations on May 14th, 1948 AD. Did you know? From the time Cyrus proclaimed the Jews would return to Israel from captivity until the time that Israel was recreated in 48 was 2,520 years to the day. Coincidence? Oh, I think not. Next, we need to know, who is Tarshish? Well, Tarshish is described in Scripture as being a sea power. It could be a city on the coast of Spain. A lot of people look at that and say that's where Tarshish is. Or maybe beyond. We know the Phoenician merchants traded with Tarshish. The book of Jasher actually tells us that Tarshish is Spain, Netherlands, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. Now, Tarshish, Britain, the United Kingdom as Tarshish, was proven in September 2019 when 10 ingots were found in Israel. We know that these 10 ingots come from Tarshish based on Ezekiel 27 verse 12. These 10 ingots, their chemical composition was traced to a mine in Cornwall, England. So, Cornwall, English tin, British tin has been found in Israel from the BC era, linked to Ezekiel 27:12, saying that it's Tarshish tin. So Tarshish is Great Britain. Now, as for who is Tarshish, Isaiah 60 talks about the Jews returning not from Babylon, but from their second dispersal, the one that's from among the nations, showing 2,000 years ago their return in 1948. Verse 9 has, with the Tarshish ships in the lead to bring your children from far away. In fulfillment of that prophecy, British ships led the way in returning Jews to Israel in 1948. Ezekiel 38:14 shows Tarshish and her young lions raising a protest against the Gog-Magog war attacking Israel. The symbol of Britain is the lion. Her young lions, therefore, could be the United States, Canada, Australia, etc. A few other prophecies. In Zechariah 3:9, we have the promise of God to restore to Israel their ancient Hebrew tongue. This revival of a dead language by a once dispersed nation that hadn't been spoken continually for thousands of years is unique in human history. That very next verse in Zephaniah specifically mentions Jews coming home from Ethiopia, while Isaiah 49:12 foretells of Jews coming back from the land of Sinim, or China. Incredibly, no Jews lived in either country, Ethiopia or China, when those words were written 2,700 years ago. Yet, today, both are happening. The scriptures being fulfilled. In Jeremiah 31:8-9, it says that among the returnees would be the woman with child and the one who labors with child together. Interestingly, during the emergency airlift of nearly 15,000 Ethiopian Jews over one weekend in May of 1991, there were 5 mothers who gave birth aboard planes on their way to Israel. In Daniel 11 verses 1-4, there will be 3 more kings of Persia before a great Greek king. This includes the wars between Persia under Esther's king and Greece under Sparta and Athens. But as soon as the great Greek king arises, his kingdom will be broken up into 4 pieces, none ruled by his descendants. This great Greek king, of course, is Alexander the Great. Still in Daniel 11, verse 5 is fulfilled by Ptolemy I Soter. Verse 6 is fulfilled by Bernice in Antiochus II. Verse 7 by Ptolemy III Euergetes. Verse 9 by Seleucus III in Antiochus III. Verses 11-12 by Ptolemy IV. Verses 13 and 14 by Ptolemy V. Verses 15 and 16, Israel will be taken by Antiochus in 197 BC. Just 300 years later, after the prophecy. Verses 17 and 18, Israel was taken by Ptolemy IV and Cleopatra in 194 BC. Verses 19-20 were fulfilled by Seleucus IV. Verses 21-22 was fulfilled by Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, the forerunner of the Antichrist, in 175-164 BC. He seized his authority not by right nor by force, but by intrigue. He had the high priest assassinated in 169 BC, as we see in the books of Maccabees. He deals with Egypt, but it's not what it looks like. In verses 23-24, he makes a treaty with Israel, but deceives them. In times of peace, he will accomplish what his ancestors never did to Israel. In verses 25-26, he does against Ptolemy IV. He goes against Ptolemy IV, and the Antichrist will do so again to the king of the south. Both Ptolemy IV and the king of the south in the future will be betrayed by the younger brothers. Antiochus IV, the prophetic forerunner of the Antichrist, sacrifices a pig at the altar, sets up a statue of Zeus in the temple. This is the abomination of desolation that Jesus references as something that has happened in the past and will happen again. Still in Daniel 11, in verses 29-30, the Romans under Papylus will come in ships and stop the Antichrist, and he will be enraged at the Holy Covenant. Verses 31-32, he desecrates the temple, but people who know God will take action. That was the Maccabees in the past. In the future, it will be all Israel. Verses 33-34, Roman occupation of Israel. Those with insight that it mentions there are Christians. The sword in that verse is the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Flames, the temple's destruction, and the expulsion is the spreading of Israel. Verses 36 and on will be fulfilled after 1948. Daniel 11 and 12, Daniel was writing in the 500s about the 300s. The king of the north is Syria, the king of the south, Egypt. This happened in the intertestamental period, about 300 BC or so, and will happen again. 2060s, 2070s, somewhere in there. That's kind of what we're thinking, but who knows. The Antichrist will be the king of the north, Not a president, not Hitler, not so-and-so. They're an Antichrist, yes, but not the Antichrist. A few more freebies. The destruction of Iran is mentioned in Jeremiah 29:35, and in Enoch, and in Micah. We have the Psalm 83 war, the Isaiah 17 war. Other texts talk about unnatural weight gain and unnatural memory loss in the latter days. Daniel 11:45, Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, actually sets up his troops in the same location that the future Antichrist will set up his. Daniel 12, Michael stands up. He is the Prince of Israel, the general of the armies of heaven. And there is trouble like never before, the tribulation. Israel will be delivered and saved, and everyone whose names is written in the book will be saved. Enoch, Elijah, all the Old Testament saints were raptured, and it will happen again. The shining ones is literal, glorified bodies. Daniel 12 verse 4 says, time of the end, these are the birth pains. That's what Jesus said. Irenaeus, the church father, a disciple of the Apostle John's disciple, notes some of these things. In his book Against Heresies, written in AD 170, he's quoting Daniel 12 when he says, shut up the words until the time of consummation of the age, when many learn and knowledge is completed. At that time the dispersion of Israel will be accomplished, and they shall know all these things. So seal up the words in the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. Isaiah 53, Daniel 9 both say this. When Israel comes back, it's the birth pains. Guess what? Israel is back. We're in some crazy times. Perhaps the birth pains of the tribulation. And people will know these things. The Dead Sea Scrolls comes back. People are more open to reading Daniel. And these things come back. They start happening because we are closing in on the end of the age. Daniel 12, verse 7, time and a half, or 3.5 years from the desolation and intense persecution of the holy ones, until the Antichrist is destroyed. From the time of the daily sacrifice being gone and the abomination happens, until the return of Jesus is 1,290 days. Gabriel says, blessed is the one who makes it to 1,335 days. Or, if you add up the numbers, 1,335 minus 1,260, because that's how many times mentioned earlier on. You get to Pentecost, the first Pentecost after the return of Jesus. If he returns on the Day of Atonement, then the difference of days there puts it on Pentecost. The first Pentecost, the millennial kingdom. We know at Pentecost that's when God likes to make covenant. So Noah's covenant, Abraham's covenant on circumcision, Jacob's covenant going to Egypt, the Ten Commandments, God's covenant with David when he dies, that one of his seed will sit on the throne of Israel, the new covenant in Acts 2, all those happen on Pentecost. So Gabriel's saying, blessed is he who makes it to Pentecost, of the first Pentecost of the millennial kingdom. So next week we're going to look at the end times as they are found elsewhere in Scripture. I thank you for joining me and look forward to seeing you in Lesson 4.